Thank you very much. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, January 26, 2021. A meeting of the Salem-Keizer School Board is called to order. This meeting is a work session. We are hoping to conclude this meeting by 7:30 p.m. And I'm going to quickly take attendance. And as I call your name, please acknowledge. Vice Chair Bethel.
Here.
Dr. Blasi.
Here.
Dr. Hine.
Here.
Dr. Leopold.
Present.
Dr. Kylo.
Here.
Dr. Goss.
Present.
Advisor Mebinton.
Present.
Thank you. And Satya Chandrakiri as well. I'm going to read, and we have a couple of guests who have joined, and Mr. Adams also has joined us tonight from Oregon School Board Association. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. The acknowledgement.
Just really quick, can I just say, if you're not speaking, can you please mute your microphones? There's a fair amount of background noise happening for me.
I think it's Kathy's.
Okay.
I'm trying to text her, but I'm not sure where she went.
Okay, thank you. I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
All right. Director Goss, there was a request to mute that microphone. Thank you very much. Acknowledgement is critical in building the necessary trust to coexist in harmony with one another. Indigenous tribes and bands have been apparent on the lands of the Willamette Valley across Oregon and throughout the Americas since time immemorial. In this valley, the ancestry of the Kalapuya reaches furthest back in time, reminding us that this plentiful place has been called home by its original inhabitants long before the names of the snowy peaks and bountiful waters were re-identified. Today we acknowledge that the people of this land still exist and inhabit this valley, not as heirs to it or artifacts, but as reciprocal contributors to the modern society we live in. We forward our respects to the first peoples of this land, the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon, and those who have ceded lands here. We reflect on the displacement, removal, and genocide of indigenous people that occurred throughout Oregon and beyond. In so doing, we truly honor the gravity of the past and endeavor to see that people may live in harmony and equity on this land for posterity. May this acknowledgement carry resonance as a tool of peace over the land, waters we mutually rely upon. Please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. All right, now we're going to read the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. There are no agenda modifications, but I just wanted to say a few words. And following that, Superintendent Perry will join us and say a few words as well. January is a school board recognition month. I just wanted to acknowledge and say I'm proud of each one of you who have served as voluntary, locally elected school board members, facing some of the toughest challenges. And yet, you stayed focused on the 49,000 lives under our watch. Thank you. This was a very tough, unprecedented year. Together, you put in hours of work, both during the board meetings and outside the board meetings, as the safety, health, and learning of our students and supporting the efforts of our district staff and our community depended on what you did. We faced many disasters together. It took a toll on our community, but thank you for all that you've done. Our board focused on many important equity issues. There's no doubt about it. We also worked on our internal transformation during this time. We learned together, we worked together so that we could all work to do our best and be a high-functioning board. It wasn't an easy journey, I must acknowledge. And we have a lot of work to do ahead, and I'm confident that we will. So thank you very much. And thank you for letting me work alongside each one of you and serve you and our district. So I also want to thank our community for giving us this opportunity. Thank you. Superintendent Perry.
All right, just a couple comments. So I just want to recognize that it has been a tough year for all of us. And as we reach that place where we're feeling fatigued in our journey, I just want to remind us to keep our focus on equity and our students. It is really fitting that you've embarked on the journey of working together as a board, and that Vince is here from Oregon School Boards Association tonight during School Board Appreciation Month to continue that journey with us. I think it's also really fitting to say you've adopted a policy around a student being advisor to the board, and here is Lynette tonight to have her first official meeting and to swear her in as an advisor to the board. So I think it's a great moment for us to take a moment and reflect on that. And then I would also be remiss in not recognizing that we are coming up on National School Counselor Week. It's February 1 through 5. And with joining Lynette tonight is her counselor from McKay. And I think it speaks to the power of a counselor and the counselors in the lives of our students when a student advisor to the school board chooses her counselor to be here by her side. So with that, I think we should turn it over to the swearing in process around our student advisor on the school board. And thank you for your commitment to this ongoing learning together.
Thank you, Superintendent Perry. I just wanted to say this has been a very important historic moment in our district. And I want to thank Director Leopold for taking this initiative and introducing this resolution, and thank our board for supporting a student advisor to our board. So thank you very much. I'm confident that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s prayers and dreams will come true with leaders like the students who were, nominated for this position of student advisor. It was a tough process for us to decide, and all of them were wonderful and amazing leaders. Without any doubt, our nation is going to be in good hands with leaders. And it's going to take all of us to work together so that we can have one America for all our children. Today is a very important day because we will be swearing in Advisor-elect Ms. Mabinton to our Salem-Keizer School Board. This is historic. We have invited a few guests and to share their words of encouragement and blessings. We seek our community to share your support and blessing as we take such important steps in the right direction to dismantle structural racism and inequities in our community and usher a new era where leaders like Advisor Mabinton will lead our nation. So with that, I requested a small tradition that's very, from the place where I come, where we start by recognizing the teacher and then the family and then the person who is being honored. So with that, I would like to request and thank Ms. Cynthia Richardson, the Director Cynthia Richardson, Director of our Equity Committee, to introduce Advisor-elect Mabinton.
Good afternoon, Chair Chandagiri and Vice Chair Bethel, our Board of Directors, Superintendent Perry. It is my pleasure to introduce to some and to present to others our first student advisor to the school board. I have watched Lynette grow up over the years from a little girl until the fine young lady she is today. I want to acknowledge her grandmother, Victorine Kellum, and thank her for all of the work that she has poured into you to make you the young lady that you are today. Lynette, you are a natural born leader. You possess wisdom and charisma beyond your years. You are a straight shooter. You say what you need to say. You say it honestly and in a kind and gentle way. You're patient. You're ambitious. You're very reflective. You have good instincts. And you look at problems and solutions in a very revolutionary way. I've observed you serve on our first district equity committee. You are now serving on our student district advisory committee. You're just a natural leader, and I can't tell you how proud I am of you. And I can see right now that you will be a leader of the future because it's all over you. You're branded, okay? Can we congratulate you? I was just so happy for you. Can't thank you enough for all you do. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jennifer Strong, who is also a counselor at McKay High School, where Lynette serves as a senior there. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I am just so proud of Lynette. I've known her for 4 years, and in those 4 years, she has held so many leadership roles within the school, from Black Student Union, student advisory. She's been manager for athletic departments. We've called on her so many times for leadership and to speak for the students. I know she's going to do a wonderful job. She has a beautiful heart. And like Ms. Richardson said, she's wise beyond her years. Even though I'm an adult, I personally have learned so much from Lynette. I've learned from her. And I'm just really, really proud of her. And I'm excited to see her in this role. I'm very proud.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strong. And
yeah, thank you.
Our students are who they are because of all the hard work our teachers and staff have put in. And so, as parents, we bring our little kids' tender brains to your school, and 12 years later, you make them amazing leaders for our nation and the whole globe. So thank you for all the hard work you do to nurture our children. And so for that, I'm grateful. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Irwin Brown, who's the Education Committee Chair for Salem-Keizer NAACP. I reached out to Dr. Reginald Richardson, the president of NAACP, and said, this is a very historic moment And if you would be kind enough to come here and say a few words of encouragement and blessings for advisor-elect Ms. Mipinton, because this means a lot. It means a lot for our student advisor. It means a lot for all of us in our board. And it also means a lot for me to have that. And so I really want to say, Dr. Erwin Brown, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you. And we need your guidance. We need you to help us get to the direction where we can literally close the achievement gap. There should be no reason for that. If there is anything that's going on, it's we who are the reason. So we need your help. I look forward to working with you. And so please, a few words of encouragement and blessings would mean a lot. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and hold this space, and to our superintendent and to the rest of our board members. This is a good place to be. And Lynette, Miss Lynette, if you mind taking so I want to have a conversation with you real quick. So how are you doing today, Miss Lynette?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing very, very well. We are in a beautiful place right now. We are in a beautiful space. And one of the things that was said to us earlier as we were reading our land acknowledgement was that it's important to not only hold space, but look at the past and the gravity of it and honor it. And so when I see you, I see us. And you know what I'm talking about. To be an African-American and to see you in the skin that you're in and the role that you play, it's important to say that I see you, I affirm you, I believe in you, and I support you. And when I look at us here tonight, and I see Miss Cynthia Richardson there, someone who's spoken to my life on more than one occasion, and she is still speaking into my life, it is good to have a representation to see us at the table. And so one of the things I would like to read to you, and I'm pretty sure the words will be familiar to you. So listen closely. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our brightest star is cast. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Those words, we were not around when they were written, but we are the unborn hope that sits here today. And we saw last week of a beautiful face, none other than Amanda Gorman, where she took the center stage for our country to proclaim the hills that we climb are worth climbing. The hills that we climb are worth sharing. And so tonight, we honor you. Tonight, we honor our ancestors who have come before us and who have paved the way. And so tonight, we hold space for you. We have grace for you. And to let you know, the hill we climb, we are climbing it together because there were some who climbed it before us. So on behalf of the Salem-Keizer NAACP chapter and our president, we want to congratulate you and thank you for serving and giving to this community and to those that will follow you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. Those were kind words, and I hope I really appreciate that. And now I would like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Dekopoulos. who will lead the swearing-in ceremony of student advisor-elect Lynette Mabinton. And
Thank you, Chair
I also want to thank your family for joining us and watching this. So please convey our regards to them.
Ms. Mavaton, it's my privilege to administer the first oath of any student advisor for the school board. And so I'm going to say the words, and if you repeat after me, and please raise your right hand. Thank you. I, Lynette Mabinton,
I, Lynette Mabinton,
a student of Salem-Keizer Public Schools,
a student of Salem-Keizer Public Schools,
and as the appointed student advisor to the school board,
and as appointed student advisor to the school board,
do hereby affirm my commitment
do hereby confirm my commitment
to represent all students
to represent all students
and bring the voice of all students
and bring the voice to all students
to the school board.
to the school board.
Thank you. You're officially sworn into your office. Congratulations.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I'm so nervous. Thank you guys. Thank you for all your kind words.
And I'm just going to say, Lynette, I'm super proud of you. I've watched you grow up and further develop your leadership skills. And I want to echo, like, I learned from you. So you make me better.
Thank you so much. You guys, thank you. I'm so humbled. I'm so honored to serve.
And a few of us got pictures, so don't worry.
Okay. Welcome, Advisor Mabinton. So now I'm going to turn the rest over to Superintendent Perry. And this is about the 2020 graduation report. And Superintendent Perry.
All right, so Dr. Adosnata is going to take you through our 2020 graduation report. And we have a lot of data, and he's not going to go word for word by the slides, but I think some of the graphs and the way we represent them can really show you where our strategies are working to close the gaps, and also where we have more work to do. So the work isn't ever finished, but I do think it's a moment for some really important celebrations on behalf of our students. While 2020 didn't end like we expected it to, and it would be easy to say, well, maybe it was easier to graduate in 2020, I would say it was harder to graduate in 2020. A changed instructional model, kids learning out of their homes. It would have been easier for kids to leave us than it was for them to stay. And it would have been easier for our educators to not go after them than it was to go after them to come back. So this is a tribute to our students and our educators who were on the front lines of a global pandemic and didn't give up on kids, and kids didn't give up on themselves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Adosnata, who's going to do a quick preview or sharing of our graduation rates.
Good evening, Chair Chandra Gary, Superintendent Perry, Directors Board. I have a really good presentation to share with you because, like what Superintendent Perry shared, it is a graduation report which really does highlight the commitment that our school leaders and educators have shown to students, and it also acknowledges. It gives affirmation to our students who really stuck it out throughout the pandemic at the end of the year last year. And one thing that I want to say about our graduation is that our graduation rates are really symbolic of accomplishment for students. And so it's especially this year as a marker for the district that we want to share and celebrate. But it's also when someone graduates from high school, it symbolizes a life changed and opportunities opened. And when a student doesn't graduate from high school, it's a lesson learned from us that we still have a lot of work to do. And so what I'm going to share with you today is our graduation rate marked by our 4-year cohort, and then also our 5-year completers. And just so you know what I'm speaking about, our 4-year cohort is those students who have entered high school in the class of 2016-17. So they started high school in 16-17 school year, and they completed in the 19-20 school year. And they earned a high school diploma, which is acknowledged by the state of Oregon, and they met Oregon standards and also our district standards. And so that's 24 credits plus meeting essential skill requirements, which also includes passing algebra or 2 algebra classes or higher. So let me go ahead and show the data to you. So here's our 4-year graduation rates. And like I said, like Superintendent Perry said, we're not going to go over every single data point. Instead, what I really want you to do is just look at the trends. And this is our 5-year trends. If you look at the maroon line, what you see right there is steady growth. And that's a really good indicator, especially since we have 42,000 students in the district. So this is really reliable data that we're doing the right thing. And we also get to see certain groups that have demonstrated growth. And we also see where we still have some work to do. So you can see that our Hispanic Latinx population has our highest graduation rate of our various ethnic groups. You can see that our Black and African American group also has a high graduation rate, a higher graduation rate compared to the state average. And see that we still have some work to do with our American and Indian Alaskan Native population. So overall, our graduation rate is at 81.01%, and that's an increase by about 1.5%. And then here's our focus groups. And so these are a different subset of student groups that we try to focus on that we really try to focus on and increase the graduation rate with. As you can see, our students with disabilities have really improved over the last few years. So you can see they were somewhere close to 50%, and now they're at 67.26%. And also you can see that in our speculation is that the pandemic really hit our students experiencing homelessness, but their graduation rate is up from last year, but we still have some work to do with that group as well. So here's a list of our 5-year completers. Our 5-year completers, and Superintendent Perry, do you have something you'd like to add?
Can you go back to the 4-year for just a minute?
Yeah, no problem.
The state average was just a little over 81, and we're for state average for all students is right at that 81. So we're really close to the state average. And I just wanted to correct that we do have a couple subgroups in the, sorry, go back one more if you would. Our African-American Black subgroup is at 73, so still below the state average, but showing really steady increase. It's our dropout rate that's below for our
Okay, Black. Sorry, thank you for the correction. I apologize. So for our 5-year completer rate, our 5-year completers are marked by those who get a high school diploma in 5 years or complete a completer program in 5 years. And so that can be getting your GED. That can be doing what they call an extended diploma program. And so if you meet any of those marks, then you are a 5-year completer. And that also includes just getting your traditional diploma. So you can see there again, we're at 86.25%. So what this means is we aren't giving up on our students, and we're making sure that they know that if they don't get their diploma after 5 years or 4 years, they can still come back, and they're encouraged to come back for that 5th year and finish it up. And again, it's still opening opportunities for students. Okay, so our dropout rates. So this is something that we are pleased with, especially if you go back to 2015 and 16 and look at what our rates were, and then look at what our rates are now in 1920. So again, like Superintendent Perry mentioned, our Black and African American population had a dropout rate of higher than 10% back in 2015-16. and look at where it is now in 2019-20, 0.59%. So that's, we're really pleased with that. We do have some dropout rates that we're going to continue to work with our schools and our community specialists to get down, more specifically with our American Indian and Alaska Native population. All right, and then here's the dropout rates for our focus groups. Again, a pretty tight cluster for most of our groups right here, which are not that much different from our overall district rate. But you can see our students experiencing homelessness, is a group that we need to focus on. So right here is a breakdown of all of our schools' graduation rates. And I'm not going to read all these highlights to you because we're going to have a video where our principals share with you their bright spots. But you'll see that almost all of our schools have higher than an 80% graduation rate. And so and almost all of our schools have improved their graduation rates over the last 5 years. So we really are pleased with the trajectory of our achievement in getting kids across the finish line. Right here is a slide that reflects the changes. And I know I'm going through these a little bit fast. You do have, the board has access to this document in their board packet. And so I apologize for going real fast over this because I know that some might want to slow down and look at some of this information. But I just want to highlight that you can see almost all the groups in the right column. They're showing improvements from last year. Again, there's a couple of student groups that that did have a slight decrease, and we needed to drill down and see what happened with those groups and make sure they're getting the academic and social supports that they need to be successful in school. Again, here is our graduation rates by subgroup. You can see there's that trend of improvement for almost all groups. The tag group is the one that had a slight decrease. Again, when your achievement gets above 95%, there's sometimes what we refer to as a regression to the mean. And so that group still has a graduation rate of 95.6%, which is very high. And then the last thing I want to show you before sharing the student video or the principal's videos is that our dropout rates are down. And most of the time you don't like seeing red on a paper, but this time it's a good thing. And that you can see almost across all subgroups and ethnic and diverse populations, our graduation rates are lower. Our dropout rates, I apologize, are lower than they were last year. So again, I just want to praise all those who had a part in helping our students get across the finish line. And we do know that our high school teachers, principals, and staff get a lot of the credit, but this is also a testament to our middle school and elementary school staff that help shepherd these students and bring them into high school prepared. So this really is a team effort. Now what I'd like to do is Erin Harada has done a good job of assembling some video footage of our principals sharing some of their bright spots and some of their highlights and things that they'd like to share with the board that they're proud of. So I'm going to stop sharing my video and let Erin take control.
I believe, Ethan, it's going to be Emily this evening, I believe.
Okay.
Correct, Emily?
That is correct. I am pulling that up right now.
Emily.
All right. Can we all see that? Are we ready to go?
We were able to climb up to an 83% grad rate for the 4-year cohort, climbing almost 7.5 points from last year. Huge amount, and 15.5 points over the last 3 years. So we're on a steady climb. Also wanted to note our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander group went up by about 16 to 17%. Black African American graduation went up 20%, and our students with disabilities grew by almost 8%. So together we are navigating our true north and doing what's right for kids, and we're excited to be able to celebrate that.
We are so excited to see the growth we've had over the last 5 years, specifically with our students who have disabilities. As a population, we are now at a 92% completer rate. And over the course of the last 5 years, that's almost a 42-point increase. So that is a building commitment, and we're going to continue doing that with a focus in the future on our economically disadvantaged students and our students who are homeless.
ECHS students, again, earned over a 90% graduation rate with a 5-year completer rate of 98%. Graduation rate for ECHS students from underserved races and ethnicities was over 90% this year. And over at Roberts High School, we can also thank the entire Salem-Keizer district for our student success as they come from areas all over Salem-Keizer. And through the amazing support of our Roberts staff, students' 5-year completer rate this year increased by 2%. And we were able to continue testing during the pandemic for students with their GED, and 87 students earned their GEDs last year. In addition, our Roberts staff worked very hard to connect with our students and kept 70 students engaged in their education, and those students are working right now to complete their education.
We had a stellar year this year, like many others across the state of Oregon, and our graduation number was really high, and we're proud of it. But our pride point isn't just the number, it's the people. When I say people, of course, I mean the graduates who had to work hard and their families there to support them, but really the village aspect of our office staff, our security folks even got into the act, making phone calls, knock and talks. We had teachers volunteer to adopt a senior or a couple seniors that they would monitor throughout the year, build relationships with kids and families. We had our counseling office, our CAPS, you name it. We had people from all different walks of life here at school that don't always work together, but we're able to wrap services around these seniors and help get them across the stage.
At CTEC, we are so proud of the increasing graduation rates at every single one of our district's high schools. At CTEC, we ignite the spark of each student's future and tie everything that they're learning to the life that they are designing for themselves. So it's no wonder that CTE concentrators graduated at a rate greater than 95% in every single one of our district's high schools. When you take one student who is likely to drop out, and that student not only graduates from high school, but launches into a high-paying profession, you change the trajectory of that student's entire family for generations to come. And this is only the beginning. As our systems get stronger and stronger, the success of our students gets more and more certain, because what's at stake is their whole lives, and it's too important to leave it up to chance.
We had over 92% of our seniors meet the graduation requirements, leading to us being very proud of a 10% increase in our graduation rate over the last 2 years. Another pride point for us is that 92.98% of our Hispanic Latino population graduated, which is an improvement of over 10% from the year before. We also had a 14% improvement in a graduation rate for our homeless students, a 10% improvement for our students with disabilities, and an 8% improvement for our English language learners.
I'm happy to report that 91.21% of our 4-year senior cohort graduated with a diploma. There are a few specific metrics that we're most proud of. In the 2014-15 school year, our Latino students, which represent about 1/3 of our student body, had a 73% graduation rate as compared to our white students at 86%. This past school year, that achievement gap has completely closed. In fact, for the first time in school history, our Latino students had a higher graduation rate at 91.48% than our white students at 91.25%. Over that same span of 6 years, we've seen students receiving special education services go from a 52.2% graduation rate to an 82.5% graduation rate this past year.
This is the second year in a row. We've been at or above the state average at McKay. We're well into the 80%. That's a big deal. And I think 82% of our underserved and ethnicity kids are graduated last year. And a shout out to all of our McKay area elementary schools and middle schools. Our jobs are substantially easier at McKay with the work that's happening at the elementary schools and at the middle schools that are preparing our kids for high school. So thank you all for that. We're the ones who get to celebrate it at the end, which we appreciate. Thank you all.
And I just have a couple of bright spots to share, just to piggyback on what was shared by our high school principals. So at a district level, our grad rates are up by 2%, more than 9% gain in the last 5 years, with 80% of our students now, over 80% of our students now graduating. And our grad rate for our Black and African American students increased by 3 points over the last year. And 22 points in the past 2 years. And our grad rates for our for 44% of our students who identify as Hispanic Latinx increased by 1.3% and 3.7 points or percent since 2018. A couple of things I really want to highlight again is that grad rates is 67% for our students with disabilities. In our career and technical education, 92% of our students who are participating graduate, and our concentrators a 95% grad rate, which is a testament to the success students are having when they're engaged in those programs. So again, in a year that has been difficult for a variety of reasons for our students, this is certainly something worth taking the time to celebrate. We're really pleased with the efforts of our students, and we want to celebrate them on a public forum. And we also want to give kudos and praise to our staff who always work tirelessly to help our students get across the finish line. And lastly, one last thing, and I apologize, but a couple of things I do want to share that have contributed to the improvement of our graduation rate. Has been a variety of targeted interventions, everything from our CSOCs to our strategic planning from our building leadership. And when I arrived, I just remember talking to Rob Schoper, who's the principal at McKay, and him talking about how it was unfortunate that they didn't get a hold of graduation in June, but having graduation in August gave those kids the opportunity to graduate with their peers who are working all throughout the summer. And so that just goes to show that we have a special collection of schools who work with kids at the very end. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I think we'll kind of go around and see if folks have questions. I want to start with our advisor, Mabinton, to start with. Go ahead, if you have any questions. Let's start with you and then we'll go around. Make sure everybody gets a chance to ask.
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I'm very proud of the fellow students that got to walk across the stage. And thank you to all the staff members that helped make that happen. Yeah, it's for anyone, so I'm proud.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Bettel, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think it's always exciting every year when we get to see the progress of our students. And 2020 was pretty remarkable. The two things that I take note of specifically is the 87 students who received their GED last year. That's huge. I mean, to be able to do that during a pandemic and all the other things that they were tending to, I hope that a lot of them hear us say, good job. Not to discount what other students did, but I just know that hill is a very steep hill to climb for a lot of those students for a variety of things that they can't control. And that's a huge number. So please pass on to that team over there. Good job. And if we have a chance to come over and be invited for a tour, I'd really love to see what that looks like. You know, once we can get back into person, if that could be set up, I'd really appreciate it. And then the second thing is I have the privilege of participating at McNary on a regular basis. And the programs that they have established over there for their students of color are awesome, but specifically their Latinx programs, they have done a phenomenal job. And obviously we see that in the graduation rates. I know that Principal Jesperson has the model of one sport, one program, one activity. And I firmly believe that that is instrumental in engaging these kiddos. They have a Latinx program specifically to where they focus on their culture and do things that I enjoy participating in and observing. And I'm certain that that is helping those kids across the stage. So I hope all of our schools can replicate those types of programs for our students to continue to see these numbers rising. I'm also excited, and as I imagine Director Lippold is, to see what opportunities come for the Native American students, because engaging in culture is what helped me be successful through my graduation years in Salem-Keizer. And we used to have a really successful cultural program for Native students that I hope we can get back. And if I need to host the first potluck, you let me know, because we'll get it done.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Dr. Blasi.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but also want to offer congratulations. I know there's been a huge focus around equity, focus on from the district, and I'm really, really excited to see those opportunity gaps closing. And I appreciate that the district points out the areas that we still have opportunity for improvements, but this is definitely worthy of a celebration. I know, even at South High School, all the amazing work that was done the end of last year to get so many students across the finish line, one-on-one work with students, just the way the community wrapped around students in such a challenging time. And I know it was a lot of work, but it really has paid off. And thank you, Superintendent, and to your team and to everyone across the district for the incredible work just during a global pandemic of all things. So thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Director Blasi. That has been so nicely said. Director Hine.
No questions. Pretty much, I could say pretty much anything that's already been said, and appreciate all the hard work from the district.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Director Lippold.
Yeah, per usual, I have about 3,700 questions, but I'll try to stick to a couple. First, like everyone else said, this really goes to show the amount of work and dedication our districts put towards equity, and also our teachers, because they're in the front lines, every single day, and to our students and parents who are, living this. These are the lives of real people, and so to see this big of an increase and to be able to see where our district is at, even from when most of us started, on the school board, it's a huge difference. And not just as a huge difference, but it really shows that a lot of good work is being done. At the same time, one of my big faults is I like to just do the work and put my head down and get stuff done. And so it's great to celebrate. I also, the second I started looking at this, I had a million questions pop in my head. Okay, how can we make this better? And so a couple of my questions are, one, on the 4-year graduation rate by focal group, where we say former English learners. Now, are those kids who have gone through the dual language or bilingual tracks? What is a former English learner?
Those are kids that have come into the district as non-English proficient at any time prior to high school and have exited out. And they could have been in our ESOL programs, our dual language programs, or transitional bilingual programs. So any student that didn't speak English as their first language at a proficient level.
Gotcha. Thank you. Now, I just think it's fascinating looking at this. Those are kids who come from such a huge disadvantage. Not only, are they, BIPOC kids, and for the most part, and coming to a new community and a new place that a lot of them don't even know. but they have to learn the language that isn't spoken almost entirely, well, for the most part, by a lot of the institutions, and yet they're able to come out with the highest graduation rate by the focal group. And so I think that really attests to the importance of language, how dual language and biliteracy programs could help kids. And I just think it would be really cool if we expanded that program to other kids. I think you all kind of expected me to say that anyways, but I'm going to keep hitting that one home because I think it's important. Next, when I'm looking at something that really does sadden me is seeing the American Indian and Alaska Native graduation rates go down. I think a lot of that, it's a crazy year, and a lot of us in the Native community, the powwows and the get-togethers are so built into our culture and our tradition that all of a sudden not having that, I've heard from a lot of kids, depression and mental health is, and there's a million other things, right? But it really hurts because I don't think that's a good enough excuse. I think we gotta figure something out. We gotta do more to help out these kiddos. My question about the 5-year completer rate. Does that mean, is this counting all the students only the kids who already didn't get the four years and only those? So the kids who already didn't graduate, is that
Yes.
who's in this data?
Yeah, sorry, let me clarify. So the 5-year completer is anybody who was part of the 4-year cohort who didn't finish in their 4 years. So for this year, our 5-year completers would have been part of the 15-16 cohort, I believe. And then if they received, let's say they didn't receive a diploma, they had 23 credits at the end of their 4 years, and they came back and finished up that last credit that they needed. Then they become a 5-year completer with not a regular, but an Oregon diploma, or they received a GED during their 5th year, or they completed any extension program in their 5th year as well. So some students might have a specialized program that goes into a 5th year, and if they complete that, then they would also be a 5-year completer.
Gotcha.
And so I believe the graduation rate for our 5-year, I believe, was 86 or 80, and I have to go back to the data. It was, of course, a little bit higher than than the graduation rate from their original cohort, because they add on to it, and then you add anybody else who completed a program after that.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that helps me understand the data. And so another question is going to be around the students experiencing homelessness, because it looks like it hasn't been being tracked for that long. And then the dropout rate for homeless students. Of course, a lot of this stuff are questions that we've talked about in other times. And so, but the big one that I was wondering is in the dropout rate. Looks like we didn't start tracking that until not too long ago. There's a huge gap between students experiencing homelessness and the rest of our students. While, they don't have shelter, so there's obviously some very clear things there. What have we done as a district to identify what the reasoning is? Because there's a significant decrease, even just within the time we've been tracking it. So what have we been doing, and then what are we going to continue to do to ensure that we're getting these kiddos to school?
So I'll just answer it in a couple ways. First of all, the Students Navigating Homelessness is a state collection. So, and they may have just changed something in the state collection, which is why we can't compare years previously. So, and I'm not sure on that part, because we have always tracked them through our McKinney-Vento advocates. And that is the program that really works one by one, student by student, getting them back into school, helping them navigate the system. So that's, I think, one of the key strategies. And then for the school to know what to do to support a student navigating homelessness. Last year in the SIA process, that was one of the areas we really were looking at. And I believe that we've added additional staffing to our McKinney-Vento office as a result of that. And it might be something that we want to think about. How do we persist and talk more in depth about a couple of the data points that are places where we haven't made enough growth yet, are, still where some of the gaps are. That might be a future topic we might want to bring forward at the board. because those are all the right questions. And I sometimes do myself go quickly to where do we still need to improve as we stop and celebrate. So that you're just doing what I would do, Jesse.
Oh, well, thank you. And then one last thing is just I want to thank you guys for your work. We see huge increases in gains for graduation rates for our Pacific Islanders and African-American students, and I think that's awesome. So I think that's definitely something worth celebrating. But anyways, I have a million other questions, but I'll do those another time. So thank you.
You have all good questions. Why don't you pull all the questions in place? And these are the questions in a lot of our minds. So you've taken this out of our, so you just add some more questions because these are very important questions as we move forward.
Dr. Chandra,
Dr. Kylo.
Can I just respond to just one thing that Director Lippold said? Because I think it's
go ahead, Dr. Sport.
Just super briefly. So we talk about the students who were ever identified as a language learner who have exited. And I think, and Director Lippold, I know you hold this dear to your heart, that we don't think about that as something to overcome, to be able to be successful. That's the great thing about that data point, that those kids bring an asset, they bring a language, and then they learn another language, and then they succeed because of those two languages. So I just think it's important for us. That's exactly why dual language makes a difference. It's not that people are overcoming something, it's that they bring an asset to us. And then they use that asset to be successful in high school. So I know you hold that dear to your heart, but I just wanted to say that because it is really something. Those kids leave being bilingual and experience the world that way. And then they're successful because of that. So I know you believe that.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Craig, for bringing that up. I mean, that's something that I think is really important for us to be able to catch each other on because you're right. I mean, that's something, these kids have not just one, but two languages, which is a huge asset to everybody. So honestly, I think thank you for bringing that up because I think it's important that we're able to, catch each other if we misspeak on things like that, because it starts with this little things, right? And the way that we speak and talk about students, I think is one of the most important things for us to do, to be aware of.
Dr. Lippold, thank you very much. Sometimes don't feel bad. This is not cross-cultural misunderstanding at all. So this is okay. Dr. Kylo.
No new questions.
Thank you. Dr. Goss. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, I will as soon as I find it on this.
No, you're fine now.
Okay, there are two major things that I think help deliver these kids into graduating and success. First of all, it's a wonderful staff and wonderful students to start with. But I think this year we were so much better on early identification of kids that were struggling. So my first graduation on the inside of this, I don't think we did that as effectively. But kids, if we could identify them, identify the problems, but particularly have staff establish a relationship with a child or two children or whatever, I think that's just the keystone to be able to achieve these numbers. And I really am proud of it, very proud.
Thank you, Dr. Goss. You said it so beautifully. I think with COVID came a lot of problems, but with COVID also came a lot of opportunities, especially with your Microsoft team and online. Literally, they ended up making about 220,000 plus phone calls or video calls in the first few weeks, that thing. Vice Chair Bethel, you have something to add before?
I do. I didn't really have any questions before, but Director Goss brought something up that popped into my mind. So my son graduated in March, more or less, because COVID hit and he was passing all of his classes. And so then he was done. And I know a good portion of our district also had that experience. I wonder if the process that was taken post those kids kind of exiting the system, and I don't know what that percentage is. It's been a while since we've talked about it. And the shift of our teachers and our teams really working on those remaining kids to get them to passing and kind of across the finish line really helped in a lot of this excellent data. And if you're considering ways to kind of replicate that, knowing that hopefully we go back to in person, and then there's going to be a lot of kids in the building till June going forward.
Yeah, one of the, we actually have quite a few seniors that are in that boat right now. And so we are almost finalized, maybe we've even started communicating about it, a partnership with Shemeketa, where we're going to transition kids from finishing their diploma into Shemeketa. And by doing that, which will cost us dollars, but by doing that, we free up resources in our, and it's not, it's not 1,000 kids that we can do this with, but it does free up resources in your high school in order to focus on the kids that still need it. And then the way we're thinking about LIPI at this point too, with that limited in-person instruction, is just to target the kids that need it the most in that senior year. So yeah, we're evolving into a strategy around that with Shemeketa. We'll implement it this year, see how it goes, and then think about what does that mean for the future post-COVID.
Well, and I just want you to know, Vice Chair Bethel, that I spoke with Director of High Schools, Larry Ramirez, and I spoke with a handful of our high school principals about at the beginning of the month. And most of them have a targeted strategy for identifying students who are on the, what we call on the fence, because they might only have 20 credits and they need to get to that 24. So any kid with 20 credits or less, they have customized plans to identify what that student needs to do and what supports they need to have to graduate. So they have strategies that I think will help to continue this positive trajectory of graduation rates.
Thank you. Yeah, Director Gauss, you're going to ask one more question. You had to unmute first. I can't hear you.
Just one more quick thing. So I think it is important that we catch as many of those as we can and guide them into Shemeketa. I think that's a wonderful opportunity. But I think in this day and age, it's extremely important to identify those kids that did graduate mid-year and went into the private job market and were successful. And I think a lot of kids look at that with COVID in needing to help the family out. And I think it's really important that those kids get recognized as well.
Thank you. That's a good point. I mean, this is amazing. It may be worth the learning what helped get the mark up. I heard some very good observations from everybody else. I'm not going to repeat all that. Now that we've reached close to 81% mark, if I were to ask a different way of looking at it, how, in absolute number, how many students need help for dropout recovery so that we can have 100%? If we were to design a system based on 100% will graduate with zero dropout, it's an aspirational goal. What extra support in our budget we need to put aside for a dropout recovery program or dropout prevention program all the way from kindergarten to this thing? Because moving forward, maybe we may want to think like that rather than just every year just going up by 1% or 2% or 10%. Can we design a system with zero dropout? Or in terms of absolute number, how many students we are talking about who would not be graduating in even the 5-year cohort?
I think that that's where a lot of our SIA strategies come into play, because a component of both our high school success, so that's Measure 98, is to increase graduation rates. In our SIA is also, there's an academic component, but there's also the SEL component and the additional supports component that we're using to hire additional community school outreach specialists at the middle school level, and just apply more resources, wraparound services and resources to families. And I think all those little things, Chair Chandragiri, they add up in the long run. And so there's not one magic pill that you can take to get kids to graduate. It really is a variety of support. So I think those things will really help to improve our graduation rates and reduce dropouts over time.
So in terms of absolute number, how many students are we talking about who will need additional services. If you really look at it from equity point of view, that would require us to set aside dollars for the budget. It would require, because if you want to scale it up, and not just in terms of what program, what the size and scale of the program, what would a number look like in terms of 1,000 kids, or we're talking about 2,000 students?
The rough data is, if we have 12,500 kids and you have 80% graduate, then you have 2,500 that you need to focus on. Now, where we lose those kids along the way, we'd have to drill down.
Hold on just 1 second, Dr. Dosanata. We don't have 12,000 high school seniors.
No, just students in general. High school students is what we have.
Yeah, so this may be a larger topic that we need to come back and kind of dig into, I might suggest.
That's where I was going to go. I think we can either stop and focus the rest of the agenda on this topic, or we can move to a next topic. And I think some collectiveness around the board about how you want to talk about this. They're great questions. They really are. Love them to death, and what we should be talking about. We just have to decide how we want to navigate it.
The reason I brought it up, I don't think we need to answer today, but we don't want to overlook the number of, maybe we can achieve it. We can close that gap, but if we have a number, then it will help us in terms of scaling up what kind of additional resources. How do we rethink how they say dollars can be spent on dropout recovery programs? Because it just means a lot for a child to graduate. And, because it takes a couple of generations for them to catch up if they don't. And so I really feel, even if we don't want to address it today, probably it's not a good idea to address it today, but it will be really helpful to look at it. It may be that number, what extra, before we run and finalize our budget, it may be worth looking into that.
Dr. Chandagiri, I think it's been really helpful that we've done the 3x3 meetings with our cabinet. And I think that there's other questions that other members might have, and we could do that in those particular meetings and then brainstorm with leadership and Superintendent Perry on how to move forward into that. I think you're doing
With that, do you all want to take a 5-minute break before we move to the next two topics? It's 9 minutes past 6. We have time till 7:30. All right. I get one thumbs up for a 5-minute break.
Knowing that this is kind of a continual update that we'll bring before the board as we start gearing up our organization to have kids back for in-person learning, or have more kids than we currently have in limited in-person. We have COVID liability protection that was passed by the legislatures. We talked a little bit about the RSSL guidance that came out last week, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. As you all know, we were excited that educators were placed not exactly in 1B or 1A, but kind of in the space between to be able to get vaccinations. And we have been moving forward with our vaccinations with a really strong partnership with Salem Health and Marion and Polk County as well. And we are one of only a handful of states who are pushing forward with vaccinations for our educators. And we think it's important to realize that what this means for our community is that it's not if we're coming back for instruction, we are coming back. And so it's the when and the how that we're scheduling right now. And we're getting those logistics figured out with lots of conversations with educators. So here's just some updates about our vaccinations. And the important thing for people to hear at this point is that we are back open for vaccinations, opening up to all district staff starting tomorrow at the fairgrounds. And it's sponsored again through Salem Health. Director McDaniel, do you want to add anything here just to make sure we get the right information out?
Just quickly. All the appointments for tomorrow have been taken. So I do know staff are signing up for Thursday and Friday.
Thank you. And there's, you can go to the Salem Health site, which is on a Facebook site, And they have all the information about how to get registered and signed up for a time to go to the fairgrounds to get your vaccinations.
Oh, okay, so did we cover everything we needed to on that one, Dr. Sproles?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So as you know, on January 19th, the new metrics came out and we reviewed those. And what we want to do is highlight the 4 substantial updates. There was a handful of updates, but here are the ones that we really want to bring to the board's attention. First, as a repeat from last week, metrics are now advisory. So whereas they were mandatory and mandated by the state, they're now advisory, and it's going to be localized decision-making on our metrics. Now, we still have numbers that we need to abide by, or that we're being requested to abide by as advisory. So the COVID number per 100,000 is been changed from 200 to 350. And we're pleased to announce that our numbers did come down last week. So we're actually inching close to that 350 number. But those metrics are advisory, and we're going to go into depth on how we're going to do some decision-making around using those metrics. Also, we need to implement a school-based safety team, and we already have school-based safety teams. So really, what we need to do is strengthen the function of those teams and to make sure that they have adequate oversight at the site-based level to monitor safety procedures. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those safety teams will do. On-site COVID-19 testing. All schools, if we are in a high risk area, which Marion County and Polk County are required to offer COVID-19 testing. And COO Mike Wolf will share more about that in a few minutes. And we need additional training to ensure understanding of protocol. We'll talk about what that training looks like. We're currently working with our associations to make sure we have the proper input on what training will be needed before we bring staff back. And we want to do that before students come back. And then districts must offer a comprehensive distance learning option. We have the EDGE program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So real quick, let's talk about these school-based safety teams. So every building it has its own unique structures, and they have their own blueprints. And what they do is they assemble a safety team. Now, they had existing teams that met monthly to make sure that all safety guidelines are being followed. Now, what this group will do now is the frequency will increase, and they'll instead of meeting monthly, they'll meet weekly for the first month of, and actually before the first month of in-person instruction. They'll start almost immediately. Once they're assembled, they'll start meeting weekly. And then twice per month after the first month of in-person instruction has resumed at their site. The membership of these groups will be 4 members at least, and it'll include representation from SKEA and ASK-ESP. The responsibility of this group is to review safety and address matters related to safety. So some things that they might discuss at their meetings is compliance. There might be issues around where staff are congregating to make sure that we're addressing those concerns and providing space for staff to go, or guidance where staff can go during their breaks. Check-in and check-out system and making sure that they're interacting with their physical distancing coordinator, or any other issue, safety issues that might arise due to our COVID-19 protocols. And then they will report to our safety and risk office. But again, they'll be interfacing with the physical distancing coordinator, and each school does have a physical distancing coordinator. So here's the timeline for bringing students back to blended learning. Again, the term blended learning is also interchangeable with hybrid that might be used at the state level. So elementary timeline, it's shifted just a touch. We're looking at bringing students back in early March, and that would be K1 and 2, and then we'd add incrementally every week or so, with the full blended model K5 target date being March 15th. At the secondary level, Third quarter, we're going to expand LIPI. So that's limited in-person instruction. Our principals already have plans to bring in a lot more students. They're right now doing some decision-making around which targeted groups to bring in. But we know that at the high school, seniors that are on the fence or need extra support, and students with disability and struggling students that can benefit from in-person supports will be the ones that have the first opportunity to come in for limited in-person instruction. Also in the third quarter, we're going to continue to follow OSA guidelines and that are county dependent right now for COVID-19 metrics, meaning that if we're in a high risk category according to those metrics, full contact sports won't be eligible to participate yet until we get out of that high risk. But again, those guidelines are being updated. And so if we find out something new, we'll be the first to let you know. And then the fourth quarter, that is when we're anticipating bringing students back in full blended. So, and we have our high school leadership teams working on what that, and so as our CAPS and our director of high schools and our director of secondary curriculum, working on different models of what that might look like, looking at what the scheduling implications are, and making sure that we're thinking outside the box to give our students the most robust blended learning experience that they can have. And so that's all I have. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Sproles. And actually, I think this is going to go to Chief Operating Officer Mike Wolf.
I have a question. Chair?
Yeah,
Chair, I have a question.
Marty, sorry, Director Hine, why don't we just complete the presentation and then we will open the question.
Okay, I'll jump in. So based on our timeline of bringing kids back in the blended model or hybrid model, you can see that the Ready School Safe Learners requires us to offer the rapid COVID-19 tests. And so we're putting protocols in place to do that. Oregon Health Authority states that the test must be self-administered. And of course, the specimens then would be collected by the person being tested, which is the person that is self-administering the test, but under observation by a testing administrator. Some of the things to be focused on is this is a test for symptomatic and exposed students or staff only. It's not a screening tool for individuals interested in if they have COVID. Right? So it's not the asymptomatic individuals. And OHA says that they basically say if you have trained medical professional staff, they could perform the testing administration. However, it's not necessary for them to do that. So we're looking into this because we want to make sure that we're doing it in the most consistent manner across the district. And we're in process of figuring out exactly how to do that.
All right, thanks, Mike. So here's our decision-making model moving forward. And the reason we need to articulate this model is because remember in the past, the county-wide metrics have really determined if we can open schools and when we open schools. Now that this is up to a localized decision-making, we need to be able to have a tool to be able to say, how will we make decisions? And I think it's important for us to still consider the countywide metrics as one of the data points that we will take into consideration. And as Dr. Udosanata mentioned, our rates dropped almost 100 points in the last 2 weeks, which is great news. And so we're closer to the 350 threshold as it stands right now. But with the new guidelines, that's only one data point for us. We also can look at school-specific data. And a good example of this would be Marion County is a large county, and we've experienced outbreaks that are pretty specific to specific locations or neighborhoods within Marion County. But if we use that as the decision-making tool to govern how we are going to operate all schools throughout the county, it's a pretty blunt instrument, quite frankly, to be able to determine whether we should operate schools. And so We are currently collecting school-specific data on the number of COVID cases, the number of outbreaks, the number of people who are being tested, information like that, which is much more fine-grained data on the localized level. The second thing is we need to ensure that our safety protocols are being followed to the letter. And we've engaged in blueprint review teams, and Ethan also mentioned the safety review teams, which will serve a really important function for schools to be able to monitor themselves the implementation of our safety protocols and have a reporting structure for if things aren't being followed and if there's concerns at the school level to be able to address those. We'll also have ongoing collaboration with our local health authorities, and we have an excellent relationship with Marion and Polk right now, and having that relationship makes a huge difference and pays dividends for our kids to be able to get us back into school. It also pays dividends then when we do have an outbreak. And I think it's important for us to realize we will have COVID introduced into our schools. When it's in the community and people are in the community, it will come into the schools. And we have protocols in place to be able to safely take care of that. But that's working with Marion and Polk as well. The fourth thing is access to vaccinations. Several of our teachers and our educational staff have already got vaccinated, and we're anticipating that they will get the second dosage in time to be able to be vaccinated before we start our blended model. Now, I think it's clear to state this isn't a requirement for staff. It's just an added layer of security. So each one of these is an added layer of security around COVID-19. And then finally, we have the ability now, or at least a path, to be able to offer rapid testing at the school level. So if somebody does show up symptomatic, if a child starts displaying symptoms during the day, we have an ability to be able to rapidly determine, is this someone who could be exposed to COVID? And then what can we rapidly do to respond to that? And that's where our cohorting comes into play. So all of these different steps create a model where we would be confident to be able to open schools, even if our county-wide metrics are still high. Can we go on to the next one, Dr. Udosanata? Thank you. So here's our next steps that we are working through. First and foremost, we're in a really tight collaborative relationship with our teachers to establish an elementary schedule. And we feel like once we have a schedule, then we can start communicating to our elementary families first on this is what your day would look like, this is what the experiences of your student would be at school, things like that. And there's lots of parts. A schedule is also is what will determine our transportation ability to meet the needs of all of our families. And as we spoke about last week, transportation continues to be a big logistical issue that we are trying to overcome to get kids back in school. Another next step is we are beginning to communicate with our school community. These presentations to the school board are one touch point for our community, but we have lots of others that Ms. McDaniel and her team are developing. We talked a little bit about the blueprint reviews, and remember the blueprints are the guidelines that were set out in the Ready School Safe Learners, and we actually submitted those to Marion and Polk County health officials. They accepted them last summer. So we went through all of the blueprint guideline recommendations already with our school teams, but that was several months ago. And so we need to revisit those plans, and that's what we're doing right now. We also need to finalize our classroom modifications. Our custodial and operations staff have been doing a lion's share of work to move furniture to be able to make space for what our new classrooms look like. And they look very different than our traditional classrooms with all the space spread out. And then finally, we're encouraging families to engage in rider registration. And what this means is for when we start coming back, we need families to tell us, will they need transportation to be able to come back to school in a blended model? We're anticipating that some families will choose to drop off their children, where in the past they might have ridden the bus, and that will greatly impact our transportation system. So those are just a few of our next steps, Dr. Chandragiri.
Well, thank you. If you can go back to all that. For the sake of making sure we proceed with the last section of our discussion, I'm just going to call one by one. If you can just state one question. If you have any other, I'm sure all of us have many questions. Please email them to Superintendent Perry, and then we can get other questions answered. I want to start with Advisor Mebinton, then I'll go to Director Hine. Advisor Mebinton.
I had questions, but they were actually answered in the chat, so I think I'm good.
Very good. Director Hine.
Yes, so it sounded in the presentation like the only place the staff members was going to get information regarding getting the actual vaccine was Facebook, and not everybody has Facebook. So, you know, where even if the superintendent is communicating, where, you know, for the public, you know, where are the other places that staff can get information on the vaccine, getting the vaccine?
Yeah, just as I'll just answer quick. Sorry, Ms. McDaniel stepping in. But we do an all staff email when we have open slots, and then we link how they can sign up. We also tell them watch the Facebook if you have access to watch for future, but we're on our second or third all district email, so they get it in their inbox.
And I try to make sure I send it to the board as well. I believe I on this morning.
Vice Chair Bentel, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I want to share, because Oregon Health Authority sometimes is a bit behind on its data. And today, in my day job, I was lucky enough to receive the information that Marion County has vaccinated over 45,000 individuals in their first round dose, which is significant. We're leading the state in that in Marion County. And the fast-paced effort that our superintendents pulled together with our health authorities, Marion and Polk both, put Marion County ahead of the process by about 10 days to get educators in that queue, in staff as a whole. And we estimated there's going to be anywhere between 10,500 and 11,000 staff total in Marion County. And we've already pushed past approximately 50% of those individuals who wanted to opt in for that vaccination. So well done to your communication team and to our staff that show up to get that vaccine. When they were told go last week, they went. I went down to the Salem site and watched multiple people that I know funnel through that line to get those vaccines. I'm so thrilled that they're engaging so we can get kids back in school. I just can't even tell you. So thrilled. So that's all.
Good job. Thank you, Vice Chair Bethel. You know, it is beautiful. I got my second shot, I tell you. It makes a difference. Anyway, Director Blasi.
I did have a quick question. For our elementary schools, what is the plan for some of the self-contained classrooms in the elementary schools, or students where it may be more of a challenge to have them socially distance?
Yeah, do you want to take that, Dr. Sproles, or you want me to?
I think we're going to say the very similar answer, so go ahead.
So our Director of Student Services has met with all of the teachers in those self-contained classrooms, and they're trying to do a bit of a school-by-school approach based on the classroom they have and the types of needs of the students and numbers of students in those classrooms. So there's a variety of approaches, and it might be good for us to come once they've solidified those to kind of come with some general, here's how we're handling them. She is working closely with them, but a lot of them have also been bringing their kids in for limited in person already. So we do have lots of kids coming in and our students with disabilities. So they're practicing a lot of those safety protocols and things ahead of time. One of the reasons we were able to vaccinate a good number of educators is our special education teachers who work with medically fragile kids actually qualified in Group 1. So that's especially for our educators who are working with really vulnerable populations. We feel really hopeful that the vaccination adds that next layer of protection for them.
Dr. Goss. You have to unmute Dr. Goss. Can't hear you. Is there any other way to unmute Director Gaur?
I can only ask her to unmute, but she'll have to press the unmute button herself.
There's another unmute.
Okay, there you go. Now you're right.
Are those emotional growth centers or the EGCs that we're talking about in elementary?
We have EGCs, we have DLCs that are for our medically fragile students. We have our, there's another one, our SKIP, which is our students with some more compromised behavioral challenges. So they're all kinds of elementary self-contained classrooms. EGCs are just one of them.
Thank you. Dr. Lippold, do you have a question?
So I understand that I'm going to have quite a few, but I do know that I understand that our role, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought I heard you speak. Okay. So our role, right, is to look at 30,000 feet high, very macro approach as to what we're doing here. At the same time, just because of what we're dealing with, and for me, my sister's going to be going to North. And so as when and if that opens up this year, hopefully, I also want to make sure that things are safe. Teachers are safe, kids are safe, parents are, right? Because that's a lot different than our own personal views on what we can do for ourselves, depending on our risk level, right? And so on that, I understand that there's a plan and what we're doing, but I would love to hear and learn more about what the logistics are in a classroom, right? And what that's going to look like, because it'd be really cool even if we had, similar to how we've been having videos about each of our schools through the bond project, if we had one that walks through a classroom, hey, here are the safety measures that we're taking. So that way people can know in their heads, we're not just going back to as business as it was, but we're also still trying to get doing our best to keep people safe. I've just been hearing a lot of conversations around, the state and with, the Native American Council on the national level about those kind of conversations. And so I would love to hear and see what we're doing within a classroom logistically.
Thank
you. So I think we can bring that into a future meeting too. But one of our things we've been thinking about is as we think about as we can get an elementary schedule solidified, which is just taking, a lot of conversations. But as soon as we could get an elementary schedule solidified, we do have a couple elementary schools that have really expanded LIPI and have their safety protocols and procedures safe. And we've thought about, could you start a couple elementary schools early, and then we can go in there and be sure to capture video and pictures, and here's what it looks like, because they become learning labs for our families to know what it looks like, and also for the rest of the district to learn some best and promising practices. So we've thought about that. It's just a matter of, and they're ready, but we've got to get the elementary schedule nailed down first. So those are great ideas and all things that are on our minds.
Director Kylo? I can't hear you.
No questions, no comments.
Thank you. I have a question. It's a tough choice we have to bring kids back. I see a lot of students are going through severe depression, and a lot of them are struggling with thoughts of suicide. And I just want to know, how are we reaching out to them, or how are we scaling up the counseling, or even on the days when they are not coming to school, because they're feeling left out, their attachment system with friends and other support system is essentially gone. So what are some of the concrete steps that we are taking to scale up how we are reaching those students, a large number of them, including the ones in high schools, with thoughts of suicide, feeling kind of despondent about their future?
So that's why we want them back in person on a greater level. than we see them now, because we do have a whole big number of strategies. We've had an ongoing counselor support line. Our counselors meet with kids individually. We've got all of our mental health providers that are providing services to our kids. But when we can get them back in person, having eyes on them one-on-one in a building where they're in person, we think is the next most important step. We have hired more counselors with our student investment account dollars. And again, we've expanded all those mental health partnerships that we've told you about in the boardroom. But we feel like there's a mental health crisis. We need to see our kids.
Is there any, just a follow-up, is there any way we are kind of getting the word out? Here are the people, but just like when we initially introduced the suicide prevention policy, we kind of took an effort to get the word out. Are there any concrete steps we are taking to get the word out and kind of re-educate the community and the students and their family? Even on the down day when they don't come to school, here are the counselors' names, places. I don't know, they used to be the badge, behind
I'd
the
love to
badge.
answer that from a parent's perspective, because I have 2 kiddos in the schools. And just before this meeting started, I received a, what's that app called that we use? I can't remember. Remind.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. From my 7th grade daughter's English teacher, who, I mean, she's sending it to the students ultimately, but parents are copied on that if they have that cell access. And she was just giving us some pointers like, hey, we're transitioning because we're going into a new semester for some of these, for the kids. And she gave us some pointers. And so for me, it's been access from the teachers. They're interacting with kids, even in a limited capacity through a window. If they see a need, they seem to be launching right out there. And I got a call from a counselor at Whitaker for my daughter because she had missed a couple of classes last week. And it just happened to be a hiccup in the attendance system. But they wanted to know, hey, where is she? Is there anything we need to be doing? All those details for me as a parent have been fulfilled. I'm sure there's holes, but that's what it's looked like for me. And the touch is constant in one way or the other. You guys have really picked it up over the last few months, in my opinion, and I'm seeing it anyway.
And one thing I wanted to add is that our high school principals are now they started this week sending out a weekly update to families. And in those weekly updates, they'll highlight important dates, but they'll also talk about things that families should know, and including links to resources and little tidbits and reminders about how they can support their students and the resources we have available to support students as well. And so we are working to develop a more robust online community where we know that we are not going to, that we're going to have to think differently about the way that we engage families. Even when we do bring students back to in-person, we do want to find a way to stay connected and help families stay connected with the resources that we provide.
Well, thank you very much. We now have to go to the last part, which is the board development. We have Mr. Vincent Adams, Oregon School Board Association. I really want to thank Mr. Adams for helping and working with us. And I had a wonderful conversation with Mr. Adams and all the support they're getting from Oregon School Board Association. So I really appreciate that Oregon School Board Association has gone out of the way to not only be present in our school board meetings, but also kind of guide us, hold our hands as we wouldn't have been able to get through this back-to-back quadruple disasters that our community faced. And so I really want to thank Mr. Adams. And Mr. Adams, we know you and everybody in our board knows you, so we don't want to go all over you. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chandragiri. Thank you for having me back, Salem-Keizer Board, and thank you, Superintendent Perry. I just want to say congratulations on the tremendous growth that you're seeing in your graduation rates. That was very impressive data to see. And also congratulations to Student Representative Mabitten and you, the contributions that you're going to make to this school board. It'll be fun to watch your work. I have to say, I wish we could continue this conversation the board has been having with staff. So a few months ago, Chair Chandragiri asked that I review, my colleague as well, Krista Miles, review a couple of the Salem-Keizer board's meetings and then give some feedback. And so that is the purpose of our time together tonight, is to just relate the things that came up in that review. And then I've also included some hot topics that are going on right now. So I'm going to share my screen and we will go over the agenda. Is everyone seeing my screen okay? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes.
Thank you. So great. So this is our agenda for tonight. I will do my very, very best to get us out at the latest 7:30. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a little bit of some tips around meeting structure and how to make meetings more efficient. Going to touch briefly on social media and public speech because the Salem-Keizer board has gotten some press recently. Going to talk about screen presence, and this is something that most boards, and I think most organizations, are struggling with. How do we show up when we're in a virtual meeting? And then just take a moment to reflect and talk about some next steps going forward. So the two meetings that I got to review were your November 10th meeting and your December 8th meeting. So to give you some reference. And just to talk about where we've been, this board has done an impressive amount of development work this year already. So back in September, you had a board retreat. We spent several hours and you set expectations for what you wanted your meetings to be like. And then you took some time out. You worked with OSBA to bring Dr. Bryant Marks to share a training on implicit bias, which was very powerful and very useful. And then later in October, you did a board self-assessment and, started developing some shared purpose around students. So this board has already been doing a lot of work. And I want to reference back to some of the work that you've already done. And this was a lens that I used when I was reviewing your meetings. And so one of the things that this board wanted to do was to be able to have hard conversations and ask hard questions and relate to each other in a more authentic way. And I was very pleased to see that in both meetings, and indeed in this meeting tonight, that is exactly what has been happening with this board. You've been more respectful towards one another. I've been seeing listening with intent to hear, the board chatting and talking about what needs to get done. You seem to be more transparent. You seem comfortable, diving into some tougher topics, like around graduation tonight. You were already digging in deep and are ready to do more work in that area. You're also able to disagree, and that's fine. But one of the things that I really appreciated over all the work that I've observed this board doing is that your discourse with each other has always been respectful. And that's critically important to model that behavior. At all times in your meetings, decorum was maintained. Congratulations to the chair for ensuring that you're creating a safe space for discourse around education. And the board's business was conducted in an orderly way, So, but there are things that came up where there could be an improvement. And one of them is the two meetings that I experienced were long, and I've already had a conversation with Chair Chandragiri and Superintendent Perry on this topic. But just to bring the board up to speed, when we have long meetings, we're having a debate about quantity versus quality. And I have this saying as a school board member, for those who don't know me, who are on the call today or watching the live stream, I also sit on the Corvallis School Board. And so I have the saying that good board work happens after 9 p.m. And so it's good to have good orderly meetings that end at a reasonable hour. Sometimes we don't always get to do that. Sometimes there is additional work that the board has to get done. But typically we try to get it done at a fairly early time, because when it gets late, we get tired and we're not our best selves in doing the board's work. So it's really that balancing quality versus quantity. The next one is public accessibility, because and the Salem-Keizer board isn't the worst example in the state. There are boards in the state that have meetings until the wee hours, and that creates an accessibility issue for the public, because if I have a job to go to the next morning and I have to be at the office at 8, that means I get to go to bed at a reasonable hour, and I can't stay up with the board and doing that work. And so I can't be present for that meeting. So we want to make sure that when we're having our meetings that we're doing it at hours where the public can participate and be part of that experience. And I think the last piece is that when it's going late, long meetings are just not fun. We want to be able to enjoy the work that we're doing. This board in this district is doing really good work. That's evidenced by the data that you're seeing tonight and other metrics that have been shared. So, but we want to enjoy this work. It's important. Any questions or comments about lengths of meetings while I take a sip here? Great.
Go ahead, Vincent, and save the questions to the end.
So electronic communications and board meetings. This is not one of these topics is germane to this board, and the others are just for reference. But the first one is Zoom chat, and this is a situation that was happening just a little bit ago. So it's important to note that chat, if it's used in the meeting platform in a virtual meeting for a public meeting, it becomes part of the public record, and I'm sure that the board secretary is downloading the chat. But the more important issue is that when there's discourse between staff and the board in a meeting in the chat, the public can't see that in real time. They can see it after the fact in the public record. But I was observing tonight even that there was important questions being asked by board members that were being answered that would have been really useful and relevant for the public to hear. And so we want to just make sure that information is surfaced, and that's important. So as a general rule, using chat is probably not a good practice. Using it for logistics, I think one of the board members was having with their camera. And so that's a good situation where you might use chat so you're not interrupting the meeting. I could see that. Again, it's still in the public record. So I would avoid use of Zoom chat when you're in a public meeting. The next one, this is just for reference, messaging while you're in a meeting. So this is, whatever it may be. Is it text messaging? Could be Facebook Messenger, Slack, whatever instant messaging platform you want to choose. Whatever it is, don't do it. It's not allowed. It's considered a side conversation under Robert's Rules of Orders, and side conversations are strictly out of order. When we have discourse, it's between people who are presenting or between the board members and actually the chair. We speak to the chair when we're speaking to a motion. So, when if it's a communication between the public and a board member, at the very best, that's a distraction for the board member in the meeting, and it could be worse because that public member is now having specific contact with a board member while in a meeting. We just can't allow that to happen. And between board member and board member, that is a side conversation that could be collusion. So it's just don't do electronic don't do messaging while you're in a meeting. And while we're like this, it's easy to do. I have 2 screens. I could have Facebook Messenger up and I could be typing. It's just something that we can't do. Also, those messages can be brought into the public record. So we just don't ever want to do that. So the next one is emailing. So maybe it's okay. At least if you're using your district email, it's within the public record, but also for logistics, you're still going to need to bring that email into the record for the meeting. So that's clear to the public when they go to look for that communication if it happens. You know, the communication between board members of the public using email, that same rule stands. That's a side conversation and it's out of order.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So we all get emails from constituents and whatever. And of course, we don't do a reply all if we're all, you know, in that email so that we don't start a meeting. You know, I replied just to the individual. But I didn't really understand what you mean by you need to bring it into the meeting. What do you mean?
So I mean that if you're receiving correspondence while you're in the meeting.
Oh, while you're in the meeting. Oh, okay.
This is all within the context of a public meeting.
Okay. So
Sorry,
I thought you meant email in general. It's like, well, I got an email from a parent, but it wasn't during the meeting.
And that's totally fine. It's totally appropriate. But when we're in our meeting, we want to be focused on the work of the board, that what's in front of us.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So there is one place where sharing an email with staff is important. And that's when a board member makes a motion and that text, the board secretary needs that text. And so what you can do is you can draft that in an email and send it to the board secretary. And that's very helpful for them to get that into the public record to ensure that that's recorded accurately. Again, the board chair has to be able to reiterate that motion before the board can vote on it. So that's one place where it can be useful to use email, but as a general rule, electronic communications during board meetings, we just want to avoid that. Any more questions on that? Great. So voting, virtual voting. So I observed a few times this board taking votes. So what Robert says is if your meeting platform has a secure voting feature, that's permissible. I don't know of a board that has that embedded in their virtual meeting platform. That would be something like what we see at the legislature, where it's an electronic voting system. I've never heard of a school board having that. So in the absence of that, we just need to use a roll call vote for all of our procedures. And that means, you know, your board has done it many times where you just do the roll call and we render our votes. And then the board chair goes ahead and gives the tally of the votes, or whoever is presiding at the time. So sometimes we see ballots or an attempts to do private voting, particularly when we're voting on a person to protect our personalities. The reality is that you're not protecting anything because the outcome of the vote is going to be public in the public record anyway. So you might as well just do the roll call vote. When we're doing
Director Hyan, you had a question?
Yeah, I don't know if it's really a question, but
sure.
I think, and I can't speak for others, but I think the reason we do sometimes a ballot vote instead of a roll call vote when we are voting for a person is not because it's secret, because it's not, and they're all read as to who voted for whom, but it's because I think we don't want to influence. Marty voted this way, so I think I'll join her, versus each board member coming up with their independent thought about who they want to vote for. And I think that's the reason. Is that right, Paul Dikopoulos? That's the reason. So I don't influence somebody else, or they don't influence me, because we're all showing who we voted for at one time.
That's right. We have, when we used to meet in person, we'd always use a written ballot. So it was essentially simultaneous voting. And then we tally the votes and who voted for who. And I mean, we could certainly do it another way, but that's historically how the board has chosen to vote for board members and for budget committee members.
So I appreciate that point of view and that trying to keep people independent in their thinking. I would counter with a school board or any local governance board is a deliberative body, in that I may have made up my mind about who I feel strongly about should be in a certain position or on a particular vote, on any vote, but I don't know everything. And that's the whole point of having a board, is that you have multiple people and shared points of view, and we're able to learn from each other to come to a better decision on how to proceed. So you can proceed any way you like. And if you want to continue voting the way you have been, I understand and appreciate the intent behind that. But I would also ask you to consider, allowing board members to deliberate. Satya?
So there are two types of voting. One, if you're trying to elect a candidate, let's say for chair or budget committee, that or what we did with student advisor. There we did the simultaneous voting. We do not discuss each other why I voted so-and-so and try to influence the next person. But when it comes to an action item, we typically have roll call voting. So I think that's the difference I have learned in the last, ever since I've been doing this. So when it came to budget committee, of course, it's probably not a good idea to influence. That's what we did with OSBA board. It's both, all of us voted simultaneously at the same time. We don't vote ahead or. So we don't want a little group, kind of like a slate of people trying to influence them.
And it's totally up to the board on how you would like to proceed. So it was just
a good system. It's fair. It doesn't influence each other when it comes to electing a candidate. Let's kind of keep it that way, unless, of course, rest of the board think roll call is the way to go. All right.
Can I just want to ask, and I don't know that we have to do it at this meeting, I would like to understand what it looks like, especially when it came to the student and how that took all just took so long. And not that the length matters in that regard, but and not for tonight, I'd love to know what it could have looked like before we decide, is that how we want it to look like? Because, do you put somebody forward, make a motion, see how many votes they get? I don't know. That's my thinking, and I don't know what the rest of the board feels like.
Director Leopold.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was rolling it over in my head, and I see why we do it the way that we do, why we have been this year doing it the way that we're doing it. At the same time, my one pushback against it is, if our goal was, my example is going to be with the budget committee. While the people that we picked were awesome and they're great people, and I know most of them, and I think they're awesome, great, awesome people. There was one candidate, right, who just has never really been a part of things, whereas there are some other candidates who are part of many different committees and many different boards, right? And so I wanted to promote someone new, to bring in someone new who hasn't really been a part of anything yet, to bring a new perspective, And I don't know if any other board member even thought of that. And so if I can't speak that after the initial vote, because we went for multiple votes. If I can't, as a single board member, bring forth, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's kind of why I'm leaning this way. If I can't bring that forward, then it doesn't give other board members the opportunity to see that. And then, of course, you would probably have a great idea too as to why you're voting the way you are. And so I think it would give us as long as we're doing it with respect and with candor, I think that we could easily talk about things like this. And in fact, I think honestly, if our goal is like equity, making sure that, because it's easy for us to think the way that we do, but if we're going to expand our horizons, right, especially with a student advisor, right, because if we're all voting one way and she's voting another, and we're not even allowed to ask her why or how, then it kind of silences that. Well, it doesn't really silence the voice. It just doesn't even let it on the table. And so I think the discussion is important.
So it sounds like a way that I can help is come up with some voting scenarios and share that with the superintendent and the chair. And this is a conversation that the board can have, and you can come to a decision that could be part of your development this year as you're getting ready. The last item that I have on the screen here is the use of unanimous consent. And I don't remember specifically if I recall Chair Chandragiri using this, but it's just a great way to make meetings more smooth with those things that are non-controversial, like approving or adjusting the agenda, or moving to adjournment. Just asking unanimous consent, saying and just moving on with the meeting. It's a great way to take a vote without taking the vote. So all you're doing is creating an opportunity for someone to object. So
hey, Vince, before you move forward, Mrs. Mabenton had her hand up. I noticed she popped it down as soon as you started talking, but she's a little new, so she's not going to jump in like the rest of us, and I want to hear what she has to say. So if you don't mind.
And I really appreciate the help spotting people, because I have 4 thumbnails in front of me. So and one of them is me. So thank you for stopping me. Please go.
I wanted to kind of go into what Ms. Perry said. I do agree. I would like to see like different scenarios of what we could do, and a little bit of what Jesse said too. So yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. So this is one of the things that came up in our work. I believe it was in our last session. Members, one of the members asked that members recognize that their discourse represents the board and district and have impacts on children, the district, and the community. And so this is a topic that is not isolated to this board in the least. And in fact, my own board has had difficulties with this. So, social media's presence, speaking with the press, and just having a public presence is challenging for electeds. And so it's something that we need to cultivate. So the reason for this slide is if any of you were registered for OSBA's summer board conference back in July, you still have access to a webinar on this very topic with 3 of my colleagues. Rachel Baker, who is our communication specialist and is really good in this space and is very knowledgeable. Andrea Shears is one of our attorneys. And then, of course, Krista Miles, who you all already know. So I urge you to hunt down that webinar. And if you need a link for that or another one, I can probably find those for you and send them to the board. So just let me know. But here's the substance slide. And so really, when we're out in public, we're not just representing ourselves, we're representing, the board. And so we want to work in collaboration. And this is part of the board working together in a unified way to bring one voice to the work that we all lead together. And so just being mindful that when we're in public, whether virtually or physically and speaking, that we're communicating in an aligned way. So, I mean, this is just a list of examples of the types of things that would be really good to share in social media, and that we should. In fact, I, as a board member, I could do better at this type of work, communicating with the public. But yeah, boards can share about the work that they're doing. Some screenshots tonight would have been really, really good to share in social media. Of course, sharing your meeting agenda or a meeting announcement and inviting the public to come and view the meeting is always a good idea. Advocacy, critically important. We're in the start of a legislative session, so advocating for the needs of students is always a good activity for board members to partake in. news articles. And this is really about celebrating the successes of the district. Hopefully the press have been watching this meeting and saw that presentation on graduation rates, and that we should see an article in the paper tomorrow on that information. And that's something that board members should share out and celebrate the success of the district. That is tremendous. And then, those momentous decisions that you guys make that can be transformative for student outcomes. Always feel free to tout those. And then anything else about the types of programs and things that are happening in your district. So take the time to celebrate the good things that are happening in your district. And this is one of the best things that you can do. I want to turn to policy next, and that is BG4. And I just want to draw your attention to the item here at the bottom. Board members' interaction with public, press, and other entities must recognize the same limitation on the inability. And so it's really referencing this first one, that board members' interaction with the superintendent staff must recognize the lack of authority over individuals and explicitly authorized by the board. The take home here is that when we go out in public, we never get to take our hat off. Even though we may make that disclaimer that I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking as an individual, the public still tends to view us that way. I have the disclaimers on my own social media accounts. It says, all opinions are my own, but they're really not. The public will always bring that if I say something that is sideways or is viewed negatively in the court of public opinion, that's going to come back to the district. It's going to come back to staff, and it's going to affect kids. And so when we're out in public and we're thinking about the things that we say, the things that we post and how we represent themselves, we want to always be thinking about, is this going to be right for kids? Before you press post, is this going to be good for kids? And so just keep that in mind as you're doing things, as we're speaking in public. Even when we're speaking in our own board meetings, we just always want to be focused on making sure that we're speaking in a way that is always supporting the student outcomes and the goals of our district. All right, I have 15 minutes. So on-screen presence, and this will be really quick, and it's kind of fun and funny because there's funny pictures. So this is a great example of what we should look like. Eyes up and into the camera. The other things to note in this image is that he's also well lit. And I should back up because this on-screen presence piece is really important in virtual meetings. This is how, right now, we have been in COVID for almost a year now. This is how the public knows us. It's how they see us. And it's how we communicate to them our intention and our caring for this work. And so that's why this piece is important. So going back to the picture of the guy, I'm trying to speed up and make time here. So yes, he's eyes up and looking straight into the camera. Perfect. I'm kind of doing that. I'm actually glancing off at my own image, which I shouldn't do. And there's a trick for that. It's called hide self view. So I'm going to hide my self view. And now I'm looking right into the camera. So I'm modeling the behavior that I'm asking you to do. But the other thing I want to draw your attention to in this image is that he's also well lit from the front and he has a nice neutral background. This is a great virtual presence. He's wearing a solid color shirt that helps his camera, balance the exposure and the color of the image. It's going to make him look better. His camera is eye level. Mine is just below. But more importantly, he's communicating that he's engaged and ready to participate in the meeting. And actually, board, you're going to get this slide deck, and there's a link here, and you can go check out this article where I pulled this image. So what do we not want to do in a board meeting? Well, don't eat dinner. No one wants to see us eating dinner. Don't do it. But sometimes we just have to. But don't be this person who's eating pizza in a school board meeting in front of everyone. And if you really do need to eat during the meeting, and sometimes it happens, My board chair is a Muslim, and he observes Ramadan, and he fasts all day. And when it's sunset, he is going to eat, and he eats in the meeting. So he needs to. So there are times when we just have to, or maybe you didn't get lunch that day, and to be your best self and be the best board member you can, you got to get some calories on board. Fine, do that. Just turn off your camera. So board work is hard, and inevitably there's going to be some conflict, and we're going to get frustrated. But, just because you're at home doesn't mean that you get to, doesn't mean that we don't see you or we can lose our composure. And so just try to avoid gestures of exasperation. Just try to maintain that decorum that you would have if you were in the board meeting face to face with your colleagues and face to face with an audience. Try to be that board member that you would want for your own kids. The other one is checking out. This is tough. This is really tough in long meetings. And it's late. It's going on 10 o'clock and you're exhausted. It's been a tough topic. It's really detailed. And I get it. Sometimes we get tired. And, it's okay to do a quick eye rub, but this is when we really need to try to not allow ourselves to, appear like we're falling asleep or we're distracted. We want to stay engaged because that communicates that we care. And another thing is that if you have multiple screens, and I do, and when I'm in a board meeting, in a virtual board meeting, my camera's right in front of me, and all my notes, all my stuff for doing my board work is on this big screen over here. And so I do spend a lot of time looking over here because my agenda and everything is over here. But to show engagement, I come back to the camera. And if someone's speaking, I give them some nods to say, I'm engaged and I care about what you're saying. What you're saying matters to me, even if I disagree, I'm going to be engaged. Or I may look sharply when, if they say something that I disagree with. But use that camera to your advantage to communicate that you're engaged and that you care about the work that's happening. This last one is don't do anything in a virtual meeting that you wouldn't do in person. It's okay to be congenial, but, give the board's work the respect it needs. But, just don't do zany stuff. I know that we're in this virtual space and we want to liven it up, but just give the work the respect it deserves. So, when to turn off your camera. This is, and it's interesting. In education, this is kind of a raging debate about student engagement, and I'm sure that the superintendent and staff could probably speak to this a bit. But when we were elected by thousands of people to represent our district and represent our children, and so we should be present in our meetings and engaged. And so we should, as much as we can, keep our cameras on. So. Of course, if you have to eat dinner, of course, turn off your camera and then turn it back on. Of course, let the chair know that you're turning it off and you're still in the meeting. If you have to briefly step away, the dog comes crashing in and you got to get the dog out of the room, go ahead and shut off your camera. Go ahead and take care of that. Or if your kids come into that has happened to me. My kids have come into the room and I've got to do a little quick parenting. I'm not leaving the meeting, but I don't want to share that moment with the public. Just go ahead and shut off your camera. That's fine. You're going to be back in 15 to 20 seconds. It's fine. And the last one is personal hygiene. I mean, every once in a while, we all have to sneeze or we all have a cough or whatever. It's okay to shut off your camera and have that private moment and then come back once you're all composed. So those are the times when we go ahead and shut off our camera. Otherwise, we want to keep ourselves on screen because we signed up for this. We ran to do this work. And so we want to be fully there and present. So this is kind of the take home at the end, is that we want to communicate our attention, our engagement, and our caring about the work that we do and who we are and who we want to be in the meeting room. So any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a statement. So, although it's really nobody's business, I do have severe back issues, and my home is not set up for comfortable long meetings, and so frequently I'm actually laying down during meetings so that I can survive the meeting and pay attention. So I'm not going to be on camera because you don't need to see my pillow hair. I don't think it's a very good look, but I'm there and I'm paying attention, but there's a medical reason behind it. So.
Marty, thank you for that comment. And I think that's critically important, that there may be situations where you just can't be on camera, but you can still be present in the meeting. I put this under a personal hygiene, whatever you need to do so you can be present. We do the same thing with our students. Some students just aren't comfortable being on screen, and they need to have their camera off so that they can be present and participate in the class. I'm not saying that you can't turn off your camera at all. If that's what you need, do it. But the public also wants to see us. And so, Director Hine, thank you for having your camera on so the public can see you and participating in doing this important work. So this is I
have a question.
Yeah, comments.
Oh yeah, more of a comment. Yeah, I would also say that because I know you watched the November and the December board meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. Well, something that I think is also really important is for us to be, when we're talking about hard conversations, as a part of that, to be able to follow the procedures that we take normally and not treat each one differently. For example, in a normal policy discussion, we ask the districts all sorts of questions and they answer it. And we don't really monitor. I witnessed today even we don't even really monitor who's asking what. It's more of we can ask the district a question if we want to ask them a question during that process, and then we get an answer. I haven't seen any other examples when it doesn't. In the last board meeting, when we were talking about the possibility of changing our school district from at-large to by zone, I was asking a question to the district per normal procedure of regular procedural things, and was cut off by another board member. And I understand, if I'm not mistaken, that only the board chair can cut off board members or prevent something from being asked. In this case, it was another board member asking that, blocking the question, and then it was eventually, kind of agreed upon by the board chair. But at the same time, I think it's important for us not to, when we're having conversations like that, not to block questions or disrespect each other, because we need to be able to be open and honest and just learn the truth about certain topics.
So thank you for surfacing that. The only way that a board member, you're right, the board chair can interrupt a board member if their comments are out of order. Similarly, a fellow board member can interrupt the person's comments by calling a point of order. And that would typically be because the comments are out of order. So you would just say point of order. The board chair would say, what is your point? So-and-so's comments are out of order. And the board chair could say, well, the comment is well received. Please refrain from your out of order comments. And that's how that would unfold from a procedural standpoint. And that's pretty much the only time we get to interrupt people. Yeah, it's important that we conduct and allow all board members under Robert. Every member of the board has an opportunity to speak once before any other members get a chance to speak again. It's an important component of Robert's rules. It ensures that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. So great point to bring up, Jesse. Yeah, Satya.
So in the Robert's rules, I have to go back and read. Is all the questions raised by the board directors, they are addressed to the chair, and is that how it is typically in a very strict sense?
I know it seems kind of stilted, but yes, that when we're debating it's called debate, when we're discussing or debating a motion, yeah, our comments are directed to the chair. And so it's a very formalized way.
It's very formal, correct.
And it feels a little uncomfortable. And if that's something, if this topic is something that this board is interested in doing, I would love to do a session on parliamentary procedure. I see that Marty has her hand up.
Yeah, and so Jesse, I want to take what you said and hopefully not cause a problem, but based on what Vincent just said, would it be that Jesse, who was asking a question, would that need to be directed to the chair, Vincent, then? The question that he had, that I think he was at, I don't remember for sure, Jesse, who you were addressing the question to. I think it was the superintendent, but I don't know for sure. But is that what you're saying, that that question should have been directed to the chair? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so typically when you're getting a report from staff, the chair will allow members to ask clarifying questions. Those questions can be directed to staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And after that, that's a particular type of discussion where the board is taking in more information. After a motion is taken up, then you're in debate and you're discussing different sides of that topic, and that's a discussion for the board, formally interpreting Robert's Rules of Order.
So I want to just, in the chat, there is some going on for the sake of public. Advisor Mebington wanted to know where he could read more about this Robert's Rules. And I want to say that Advisor Mebington, we would have an orientation as a welcome to our new board. And in that, we will go over the parliamentary procedure. I kind of made all those things. And Mr. Adams has a good training. I kind of stole his slides, so which we'll be using for your orientation. Thank you.
So I want to respect the board's time, so I'm going to skip to my closing slides. And this is really just to bring you back to the work that you've done and the development pathway that we have discussed in recent months. So you'll recall that we had a board retreat, you had the implicit bias training, and that you've done this board self-assessment. And this is the pathway that I had suggested to you, and that's at least a few board members had shown some interest in following. And so I'm just bringing the board back to this. So next steps would be around a board operating agreement, which meeting procedures is definitely would be an important topic within that. So if that's something that the board would be interested in doing, that would be really good. And it's a very good time to be doing this work because this board has been working together for some time now, and you're going into an election. We don't know what the board composition is going to be. So creating a board operating agreement is, it's like putting a message in a bottle to the new board for next year. And so taking the wisdom of this board and transmitting it into the next iteration of the school board, it's an important thing to do. So again, you don't have to jot any notes down. You're going to get the slide deck and you'll be able to see this again. You can also do some work around a board superintendent operating agreement. We also discussed some learning about equity governance and maybe some intermediate roles and responsibilities, more just the nuts and bolts of board work. And then ultimately moving on to some visioning process down the road. But visioning right now is just, I don't know of anybody who's actually doing it because districts are just so mired down in the logistics of just getting kids educated right now. So I think boards are trying to respect their district staff and making sure that they're able to meet the needs of children. So with that, I see it's 7:31. I just want to express my appreciation for the commitment of this board to their own continuous improvement, but also the commitment to children and the enthusiasm that I'm witnessing from this board around equitable outcomes for children. It's just been impressive work. And I have deep gratitude for you and for allowing me to come and visit you once again. And so I look forward to working with the board, and I hope I can be of service. Thank you, Chair Chandragiri.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. I just want to kind of open it up if there's any one question per person, and then we can email Mr. Adams. He's been so kind and gracious to answer. Director Goss, do you have it? You want to unmute and ask a question? Director Goss, you have to unmute first.
Yes.
Go ahead.
On what?
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Kylo, do you have any questions?
I have questions which I choose to not voice,
okay,
but it's fine.
Vice Chair Bethel.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Blasi, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I did want to make a comment. I was waving my hand earlier, but I like Vincent said, he's got a lot of...
I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. I just want to go back to your first conversation just real quick about the length of the meetings. And I appreciate your candor with this. And I want to voice publicly my support of your comments around the length of our meetings. And I want to make a couple observations that I hope are helpful. I appreciate that you commented on the public's ability to be able to engage, until 10 and 11 o'clock at night, and what we're asking of the public in order to do that. But I'm very concerned about our staff and our executive team during this time, and I think it would be wonderful if we could be more mindful of the time that we ask them to spend with us in a meeting when a meeting goes for 5 and 6 hours at length. They're just incredibly put upon right now by all that they have on their plate. And I can only speak for myself, but, I work 10-hour days, and then to come and try to be engaged in a 6-hour board meeting is tough. And I appreciate that you said that, after 9 p.m., no good comes from it.
I said little good.
I have seen, and I am so impressed. Our last 2 board meetings, we have set time limitations, and I think our board chair has done a really great job of keeping the board meetings to those time frames. And I would ask that even for our regular board meetings, that we look at setting some timeframes, because I think that helps give us some parameters on each agenda item. So I intend to follow up with an email, but I think it would be in the best interest of our staff and our board members and our community if we really could limit our board meetings to a reasonable amount of time. So thank you for broaching that subject.
And thank you for reminding me, Director Blasi, to compliment both the chair and the superintendent for the management of this meeting and trying to get through on time in a timely manner. That's exactly what we need to be doing, and I'll stop talking.
Director Leopold, do you have one quick question?
I agree with Director Blasi, and then I have questions, but I will withhold them, similar to Director Kylo.
Thank you very much. Advisor Babington, do you have any quick questions?
No, I don't have any questions. It was a good presentation, but I was very engaged.
Dr. Hine, do you have any quick questions?
Nope, I don't. Thank you. Thank you. I do want to say, Vincent, thank you very much for all the information.
I just want to say thank you very much. We will learn. We will get there. You're tough students. I want everybody to know we are tough students to learn, but eventually we learn, and that's equity principle. Eventually even I will learn. So I appreciate all of your help, and made it. We made it last year, and we're going to do well. So thank you very much. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Good night. Be well.
Thank you.